Gotta do what I gotta do.
Welcome to episode number 10 of the MMA Rundown. We're coming back after a bye week from last week, but obviously now we've got UFC 211 coming up this week and a few other big events going on. I'm Ben Gordon. I'll be your host as always. And to get started right off the bat, I'm going to just start looking at the four big fights on the UFC 211 card. I could kind of make a segment specifically for the Alvarez versus Poirier fight, but I'll just mix it in with the rest of the bunch for UFC 211. But starting off, the main event of the card for UFC 211 is going to be a rematch between Stipe Miocic and Junior Dos Santos. When these two initially fought, this was after Dos Santos obviously had lost his title to Cain Velasquez. In the fight that he had lost, obviously it was a pretty brutal beatdown. There were some concerns with him, and I feel like these concerns still exist even with the hot streak he has now, where he just isn't the same fighter that he used to be. Offensively, he's a little more tentative than he used to be, and obviously defensively, he doesn't take a shot as well, and that's because he took so many shots against Cain Velasquez. But with this fight with Stipe, it was going to be a really big opportunity for Stipe to possibly get a huge win over a former champion, work his way into the title picture at the time. And ultimately, he didn't get the win in that fight, but it was a fight where he still looked really good, and it made it pretty clear that Stipe was ready to compete against the top of the division. Obviously, down the line, Stipe won a few more fights, got his title shot against Fabricio Verdum, knocked him out, and obviously the rest is history. Now he's the champion and will be defending defending his belt against the last guy who beat him. So the real question here is going to be, what's changed since the last two fought? Who's gotten better? Has anyone actually gotten worse? What game plans are going to change? Where does the fight go from here? Now, as far as the Vegas odds go, even though Stipe did lose the first fight, he's the favorite to win this fight. I agree with them. I think that's probably a fair way to look at it. Stipe has been getting a lot better ever since the JDS fight. He still has kind of a fairly simple game in that he's a really good wrestler, really good boxing. On the feet, he's very dangerous. If he's having trouble there, he'll take you down on top, even though he's not exactly the most sophisticated jiu-jitsu player. He's really good on top. He's really good at getting out of submissions and defending submission attempts once they're there. And really, even though Junior Dos Santos has a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, it's not like he's a killer off his back. Certainly no more than a guy like Fabricio Verdum is. So for Stipe, this fight, it feels like it's going to be pretty similar to the first fight in some ways, but I feel like his high points from the first fight are just going to be happening more often, whereas for JDS, his high points won't be happening as often. And even in the fights that JDS has looked good in recently, including that Ben Rothwell fight, it was a fight where you feel like the JDS who is champion wins that fight quickly, whereas this JDS, he was just really tentative about picking the shots. He wasn't throwing too many combos. He was kind of single-shotting a lot, throwing a couple of shots here and there, but he wasn't really all that aggressive and looking to just exchange with Rothwell too much. It was just really tactical on his part, and it got him the win. You can't blame him for that. It's not like that's a problem, but the question is that if we're looking at this matchup being done again right now in the middle of 2017 versus when it first happened, it seems like as tentative as JDS kind of was in the first matchup compared to some of his previous fights even before then, it seems like that Rothwell fight was a step even more in that direction. And it seems like the JDS that we're going to be seeing in this fight on Saturday is just going to be, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's just going to be a more dumbed down, I guess dumbed isn't the right word to say, but kind of just a less effective, less aggressive version of JDS from what we've even seen before, and that's not a good way to fight Stipe Miocic, because Stipe he'll hit you hard, he'll find his shots, and once he gets on you, he'll go after you hard. And I kind of figure that's how this fight's going to go. I see again the first fight when they had Stipe landed a lot of really hard shots, and you'd almost figure that after the Cain fights that would be enough to put Dos Santos out, and it wasn't. But I feel like Dos Santos' chin isn't getting any better since that last fight. Stipe's boxing is getting better since that last fight. And I think to assume that Stipe is going to be able to find a shot, I would say probably in the second or third round and be able to get a finish. I think that's a pretty likely scenario for this. Hate to say that with JDS. JDS is just a really friendly guy, a really nice guy. You hate to see him go through the struggles he's gone through, but when fans were saying after the Cain Velasquez fights, hey, maybe we've seen enough years shaved off your life. I mean, you've had a great career. Maybe it's about time to call it quits. This matchup against Stipe Miocic is not a good matchup for Junior Dos Santos at this point in his career. Really, I'd like to see him kind of wind his career down anyway, just because of the damage that he's taken. Even though he's a very skilled fighter, he's a good fighter to watch. It's just, he's one of those fighters where as a fan of MMA, you feel guilty watching him fight because you feel like you're watching somebody who's just aging a lot quicker than they naturally would because of the fight game, and it's kind of disheartening to watch. And hopefully if JDS loses this fight, it's not in a too brutal of a fashion. Maybe it's like a flash knockdown and the ref jumps in early or something, but I feel like something bad's going to happen here. I hate to say it, and I really hope that on next week's episode, I'm not saying we'll see, I called it, but that seems to be the path that JDS has been heading down ever since the Cain Velasquez fights, and I guess only time will tell, and we'll see how this fight goes. But again, I'm predicting that Stipe Miocic is going to retain his title and defeat JDS and get that win back from the first fight.